Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Israeli occupation forces killed 2 Palestinians at the Erez checkpoint in northern Gaza today. 5 other Palestinians were martyred when an Israeli tank shell was fired at the Jabalia refugee camp in northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The images you are about to see are extremely disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised.
The
Israeli Security Cabinet approved to increase the scale of the open-ended military operation in the northern Gaza, dubbed Days of Patience. Meanwhile, the occupation forces escalated the violence by firing missiles on a housing project in Tel Zatar near the Jabalia refugee camp. 2 Hamas resistance fighters were martyred in the attack while raiding a motorcycle. They also opened fire on residents, killing 3 Palestinians and wounding many others, some of which were described to be in critical condition. 3 Palestinians were also martyred by the occupation forces' bullets near the presidency headquarters in Erez checkpoint in northern Gaza. The occupation forces arrested a number of the Palestinian National Security Force and shelled their headquarters.
There were 3 people from the Ezzedine al-Qassam brigades. The reconnaissance planes dropped bombs on the resistance men. I was at home. I have some medical supplies, so I took the first aid kit and headed towards the scene. I was one of the first people there. They were completely blown apart.
Despite this, the Palestinian resistance men patrolled the streets and alleys of the camp, vowing that not only will they defend it, but that they will strike the occupation forces hard.
Let the enemy know that if he dares to enter this camp, then our own bodies will become booby traps.
The Palestinian Ministry of Health declared a maximum state of emergency in all hospitals, especially in the northern part, which is crowded with martyrs and injured people.
Most of the casualties are, of course, the civilians. There are only a few casualties from the National Security Guards or the resistance. They primarily target civilians to terrorize them.
After Friday prayers, thousands of Palestinians went out to march in the funeral of several martyrs in the Jabalia refugee camp. The march took place amid extreme feelings of anger and sadness, but also amidst cries for revenge. Needless to say, the Palestinians here want to make the Israeli occupation forces regret the day their government decided to carry out military operations in northern Gaza, and especially if they risk entering the Jabalia refugee camp.
In Iraq, 110 people were killed and about 200 wounded in the wide-scale joint operation conducted by U.S. and Iraqi forces in Samarra this morning. According to U.S. Army sources, a Turkish hostage was freed, 1 U.S. soldier was killed, and 4 wounded. After peaceful negotiations failed to secure the city a week ago, the U.S. Army, alongside 2 units from the Iraqi Army and National Guard, took over the city by force.
The attack that has killed and wounded scores of people in Samarra, northwest of Baghdad, is considered to be the largest operation conducted here in the city since the fall of the previous regime. The United States Army initiated the operation, which was described by military sources as an attempt to regain control over the city. A battalion consisting of 3,500 United States troops, accompanied by Iraqi National Guard units, marched into the city to battle what the United States estimates to be around 2,000 Iraqi militias and 250 insurgents. Fighter planes, helicopters, and heavy artillery were used in the attack. The United States forces fought battles on the main streets of Samarra. They also conducted a wide-scale, door-to-door search of mosques and buildings looking for the armed individuals.
This was a random and unjust bombardment. Planes, tanks, and snipers.
كما تمكن الجنود الأمريكيون أثناء العملية من تحرير
The United States soldiers were also able to free a Turkish hostage during the takeover operation. Sadr City in Baghdad was also part of today's events, where residents marched in the funeral procession of two people who were killed last night in clashes between United States forces and Sadr loyalists.
It was not just like one or two strikes. There was one strike here, another there, and a car bomb here. If they want to strike, do it far away, not in the midst of the population.
The fighting broke immediately after 21 mortar shells landed on a military base at the edge of a southern city where the 1st Cavalry Battalion is stationed. This escalation comes after officials said that the government is determined to regain control of areas that are dominated by armed insurgents by the end of this year. This, they hope, will create the appropriate environment that would enable the government to hold the elections on time in January of next year.
A study conducted by an American polling company refuted claims made by American and Iraqi officials that the situation in Iraq is secure. The study confirms that the American occupation forces are facing resistance in most major Iraqi cities. According to the study published in the New York Times, the American occupation forces are facing resistance in almost all major Iraqi cities. The city surveyed more than 2,300 attacks that happened in the past 30 days, at an average of 80 attacks per day. The study concluded that the level of resistance is higher than what Iraqi officials are willing to admit. The different attacks targeted both civilian and military centers. Although the number of attacks fell short of the peak they reached in April 2004, which averaged 120 attacks per day, the study confirms that during the past 30 days, no district was spared from the attacks. A few days ago, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell warned that the situation in Iraq is escalating, which may hinder elections scheduled to take place in January of 2005. Meanwhile, the Washington Post said that an increasing number of private contractors working for security companies say that the situation in Iraq is much worse than what officials in the Bush administration have been telling the American people. A former U.S. intelligence official who did not disclose his name said that he kept in touch with his colleagues in the CIA, and they indicated to him that they are not happy with the U.S. policy in Iraq because it is catastrophic.
Another bloody day in Iraq leaves more than 100 dead and tens others wounded. In its second day of offensiveness, U.S.-led forces stormed Samarra, firing rockets and seizing more than 25 insurgents. Sporadic fighting was still being heard in the afternoon, and electricity and water were cut off in the town of more than 100,000. Families were fleeing. Clashes also erupted again in Sadr City, killing many others. Details with Dan Abu Sham. It was a day of bloodshed in Samarra, following a similar day in Baghdad that killed around 45, mainly children. U.S.-led forces stormed Samarra and said nearly 100 insurgents were killed in airstrikes and street-to-street combat during a major new American offensive to wrest control of the Iraqi town. Doctors at Samarra's hospital said 47 bodies were brought in, including 11 women, 5 children, and 7 elderly men. They said ambulances could not reach many wounded, as fighting, which lasted throughout the night, was still ongoing. A U.S. soldier was killed during the offensive and 4 wounded. The U.S. military says it will retake insurgent strongholds such as Samarra, the western cities of Fallujah and Ramadi, and the Baghdad districts of Sadr City and Haifa Street by the end of the year, so elections can go ahead in January as planned. Before dawn, troops backed by tanks pushed through Samarra streets as fighters unleashed mortar attacks and fired rocket-propelled grenades and rifles from the rooftops. Clashes also erupted again in Sadr City in Baghdad, where doctors said 8 Iraqis were killed. Local residents said that tanks shelled areas and damaged houses in the city. Meanwhile, distraught parents and relatives crowded the morgue of Yarmouk Hospital in Baghdad to retrieve bodies of their loved ones who were killed in a bomb attack in southern Baghdad yesterday.
Israel continued its offensive in the northern Gaza Strip following a day of heavy fighting which left 28 Palestinians dead. A while ago, an Israeli helicopter fired 2 missiles at an unknown target in Gaza City. There were no immediate comments or reports of casualties. In an earlier attack, Palestinians said some 90 Israeli tanks and armored vehicles pushed into the northern Gaza Strip before dawn, killing 7 Palestinians in Jabalia refugee camp. As gun battles raged in Jabalia, witnesses said an airstrike near a mosque killed 2 Hamas activists on a motorbike. Israeli military sources said the missile hit a rocket crew. Hours later, a missile killed 3 people near a school. Israel launched yesterday its deepest thrust into Jabalia refugee camp, Gaza's largest camp, in a move they termed an open-ended Days of Reckoning operation. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon approved an intensified campaign to reoccupy Palestinian-run parts of the northern Gaza to halt rocket firings. Tens of thousands today marched in the funeral processions of some of the 28 Palestinians killed by the newest Israeli operation. Carrying the bodies across the camp, people waved flags of different factions, chanted anti-Israeli slogans, and vowed revenge. At least 25 people were killed in the eastern Pakistani city of Sialkot when a suicide bomber blew himself up in a mosque packed with worshippers. More than 50 others were injured. Police said more than 1,000 people from Pakistan's Shiite Muslim minority were crowded into the Zainabiyya Mosque when the blast ripped through the building. Pakistani Minister of Information Sheikh Rashid Ahmad said the attack might be in retaliation for last week's killing of the most wanted Pakistani militant Amjad Hussain Faruqi. Police sources said 8 suspects had been rounded up and army and police cordoned off the mosque in a busy neighborhood. Several hundred angry Shiites rampaged through Sialkot after the explosion. The mob set fire to a petrol station and 2 police vehicles and hurled stones at buildings in the neighborhood. However, there was no claim of responsibility for the attack. U.S. President George W. Bush and Democratic rival John Kerry battled over Iraq in a fierce debate, with an aggressive Kerry accusing Bush of a huge error of judgment and Bush doubting Kerry's ability to lead America in dangerous times. In a pivotal and confrontation, Bush and Kerry repeatedly clashed over who could best protect America, the need for a U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, and how to lead the country in an age of terrorism. The 90-minute televised session gave voters their first chance to compare the candidates directly in an encounter that both camps expected would be crucial in a tight White House race that polls show is leaning to Bush. Both candidates were on the offensive early, trading shots over their views of the world and their outlook for Iraq, Afghanistan, and U.S. security in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. Bush accused Kerry of sending mixed signals with shifting positions on Iraq. In their only other foreign policy disagreement, Bush and Kerry differed on the need for bilateral talks with North Korea over its nuclear program. Kerry said he would strive to quickly enter talks with Pyongyang. Bush disagreed.
It means not diverting your attention from the real war on terror in Afghanistan against Osama bin Laden and taking it off to Iraq, where the 9/11 Commission confirms there was no connection to 9/11 itself and Saddam Hussein, and where the reason for going to war was weapons of mass destruction, not the removal of Saddam Hussein. This president has made, I regret to say, a colossal error of judgment. And judgment is what we look for in the President of the United States of America.
First of all, what my opponent wants you to forget is that he voted to authorize the use of force. and now says it's the wrong war at the wrong time at the wrong place. I don't see how you can lead this country to succeed in Iraq if you say wrong war, wrong time, wrong place. What message does that send our troops? What message does that send our allies? What message does that send the Iraqis? No, the way to win this is to be steadfast and resolved and to follow through on the plan that I've just outlined.
IDF troops killed a wanted Palestinian terrorist near the Erez crossing this afternoon, and soldiers also arrested 2 terrorists and 4 Palestinian policemen. A Qassam rocket this afternoon landed in an open field in the western Negev, but no injuries or damage was reported. The IDF is moving additional troops and armor into the northern Gaza Strip as Operation Penitence moves into its 3rd day. According to IDF sources, the aim of the operation is to put an end to the Qassam rocket attacks. More on the fighting in Gaza from IBA's military correspondent, Dennis Zinn.
According to military sources, at least 45 terrorists have been killed and scores wounded in almost 3 days of fighting in the northern Gaza Strip. For the first time since the start of the Intifada, the IDF has forces deep inside the Jabalia refugee camp. Running battles between Palestinian gunmen and IDF troops were held in the streets and alleys of the camp. 7 terrorists were killed by a tank shell while setting up a Qassam rocket for launching, and 3 more were fatally wounded by a missile fired by an attack helicopter when planting a bomb. Doctors at the local Adwan hospital said they're finding it difficult to absorb all the injured. The Palestinians reported that some 50 houses were demolished as troops and army used side alleys to advance into the camp in order to avoid the heavily mined and booby-trapped main streets.
There is a major deterioration on the ground. I think northern Gaza has become again under the total Israeli reoccupation. Violence will breed violence, bullets will breed bullets, hate will generate more of it. What's needed to stop this deterioration is a deconfliction and de-escalation process done by the Quartet Committee.
While touring the IDF deployment in Gaza this morning, Defense Minister Shaul Mufaz told soldiers the operation is legitimate and necessary because no country could tolerate its citizens being killed in terrorist missile attacks. Following a Security Cabinet meeting taken last night, the IDF moved more forces into Gaza. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon reportedly ordered the army to take all steps necessary to stop the Qassam rocket attacks. Sources close to the Prime Minister's office said Sharon initially demanded a similar strategy to that used in Operation Defensive Shield, whereby the IDF reoccupied the entire West Bank. But he subsequently backed down when he was told what enormous resources would have to be employed to take over the densely populated Gaza Strip. Sharon agreed to limited objectives for the time being. Today, officers in the Southern Command confirmed that the elimination of the Qassam threat is the prime objective of the campaign, which has been codenamed Operation Penitence. But they admitted that the weakening of the terror infrastructure in the area will be of great benefit once Israel completes the Gaza disengagement plan. The officers said they intend to hunt down members of the Qassam rocket launch teams according to lists provided by the military intelligence and general security services, to destroy the production facilities and at the same time to create a buffer wide enough to effectively put Israel out of range of the primitive rockets. Although they could not promise 100% success, they predicted that there will be a drastic reduction in the volume of Qassam attacks in the months to come. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Funerals for 4 of the 5 Israelis killed during the first 2 days of the Sukkot holiday took place today. Nachal Brigade soldier Staff Sergeant Gilad Fisher was laid to rest this morning in his hometown of Mitzpeh Hoshaya in the Lower Galilee. The 22-year-old soldier was killed when Palestinians attempted to infiltrate an IDF position in Beit Hanun before dawn yesterday. Fisher enlisted in the IDF 2.5 years ago and performed most of his service along the southern border and in the territories. He is survived by his parents, 2 sisters, and a brother. Staff Sergeant Victor Ariel, age 20, was laid to rest today in his hometown of Moshav Kadima in the Sharon area. Ariel was killed yesterday morning by a Hamas terrorist in a northern Gaza town of El Sinai. Terrorists threw a grenade at the medic as he tried to help Shulamit Batito, who was also killed by Hamas. Ariel is survived by his parents and 3 sisters. Shulamit Batito, who was murdered yesterday morning while out for a jog, was buried last night in Ashkelon. The Nisanit resident is survived by her mother, husband, 2 sons, 2 brothers, and 4 sisters. In the southern town of Sderot, the holiday's first 2 casualties, Dorit Aniso, age 2, and her 4-year-old cousin, Yuval Bebe, were buried this afternoon. The toddlers were killed by a Qassam rocket on Wednesday evening as they played outside their home. 25 people were wounded in that rocket attack. 9,000 people took part in prayers on the Temple Mount compound today. Only women and men aged 40 and over and in possession of an Israeli identity card were allowed to attend the prayers. Police were on special alert for outbursts in response to recent events in Gaza. There were no outbursts. More than 90% of Palestinians support sweeping reforms of Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Authority, but only 51% believe the authority is serious about carrying out any changes. This according to the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. The poll also revealed that 36% hold the authority responsible for the chaos gripping the Palestinian areas in recent months, as opposed to only 25% back in March. U.S. President George W. Bush and Senator John Kerry exchanged sharp words on foreign policy last night in their first face-to-face confrontation. The Gulf War dominated the debate. Kerry, who is hoping to take the presidency from Bush in the forthcoming U.S. elections, accused the president of making a colossal error in judgment in ordering the invasion of Iraq. But Bush shot back, telling Americans the world is better off without Saddam Hussein, and then he added that even Kerry once said so himself.
Means not diverting your attention from the real war on terror in Afghanistan against Osama bin Laden and taking it off to Iraq, where the 9/11 Commission confirms there was no connection to 9/11 itself and Saddam Hussein, and where the reason for going to war was weapons of mass destruction, not the removal of Saddam Hussein. This president has made, I regret to say, a colossal error of judgment. And judgment is what we look for in the President of the United States of America.
My opponent looked at the same intelligence I looked at and declared in 2002 that Saddam Hussein was a grave threat. He also said in December of 2003 that anyone who doubts that the world is safer without Saddam Hussein does not have the judgment to be president. I agree with him. And our alliance is strong. That's the plan for victory. And when Iraq is free, America will be more secure. A free Iraq will be an ally in the war on terror, and that's essential. A free Iraq will set a powerful example in the part of the world that is desperate for freedom. A free Iraq will help secure Israel. A free Iraq will enforce the hopes and aspirations of the reformers in places like Iran. A free Iraq is essential for the security of this country. Join us for a war that is the wrong war at the wrong place at the wrong time. I know how these people think. I deal with them all the time. I sit down with the world leaders frequently and talk to them on the phone frequently. They're not going to follow somebody who says this is the wrong war at the wrong place at the wrong time.
The Lebanese minister Marwan Hmedi escaped an assassination attempt when a car exploded near his convoy. Lebanese citizens condemned the attack and accused foreign agents of standing behind it in order to destabilize the country. The assassination attempt of the Lebanese minister Marwan Hmedi, who resigned recently, cannot be isolated from the tense political environment in Lebanon, both locally and internationally. This country will have to deal with what the United Nations Security General Kofi Annan will have to inform the Security Council concerning Syria and Lebanon implementation of Resolution 1559. Minister Hmedi miraculously escaped the explosion, but one of his companions was killed and another was injured. It seems that the objective of this explosion is to destabilize Lebanon internally and harm its national unity. This explains why the head of the parliamentary party, Walid Jumblat, did not accuse anyone of being behind the assassination attempt, preferring to wait for the results of the investigation. Minister Hamedi belongs to the same party of Walid Jumbala.
We are waiting for the results of the investigation. The most important thing is to maintain peace and order and obey the law.
Some observers say that the explosion that targeted Minister Hamedi near his home in Al-Manara in western Beirut is a warning message to Lebanon and Syria before Annan presents his report to the Security Council. Others say that foreign agents are behind the assassination attempt and accuse Israel because it usually meddles in Lebanese internal affairs. It seems that the perpetrators' objective was to cause civil unrest in Lebanon. At the same time, the country is being subjected to international pressure in order to break its will.
All security agencies were put on a high state of alert to help the police investigate this crime. I hope that we can uncover the perpetrators of this crime in the near future, and I promise you that we will not remain silent in the face of this criminal act. We will not stop until we arrest the perpetrators and